we're breaking down the anatomy of a kidnapping trap, tracing the exact psychological and physical steps of how a victim becomes a survivor and eventually a relentless hunter. Picture this. You've got Nick and Laura, right? Just an ordinary couple heading out on what's supposed to be a long, peaceful road trip across a vast desert highway. You know, we all live in this world of modern conveniences that gives us this deep illusion of safety, making us feel perfectly secure even in the most desolate environments. But Nick and Laura are completely unaware that a split-second lapse in attention is about to strip all that safety away and plunge them into absolute terror. It's a pretty chilling reminder that in isolated places, simply being noticed by the wrong people is far more dangerous than just losing your way. Section 1. A small mistake. It all kicks off when Nick takes his eyes off the road for just a second, barely avoiding a massive crash with a pickup truck driven by a guy named Earl. Since there's no actual collision, Nick just keeps driving. Seems like a lucky escape, right? Well, not exactly. The antagonists here use a completely premeditated three-step trap to isolate their victims in a dead zone with zero cell service. When Nick and Laura stop at a gas station a bit later, they run into Earl again. Nick just wants to keep the peace, so he apologizes for the near miss. But this syndicate has already spotted Nick's incredibly expensive car. That's step 1. Step 2, while Nick is inside grabbing things from the store, they secretly tamper with the vehicle's wiring. And step 3 is just to wait. So when that car completely dies miles down the road in a total communications dead zone, it isn't bad luck at all. It's a perfectly executed psychological ambush. Section 2. Laura's sudden disappearance. Enter a seemingly friendly trucker named Red, who offers to help them out. At this point, Nick makes a very logical but ultimately catastrophic calculation. He decides to stay behind to protect his prized car from getting stolen and sends Laura ahead into the unknown with Red to find a diner with a phone. Well, Nick pops the hood and quickly finds a suspiciously disconnected wire. He fixes it, the car starts up perfectly on the first try, proving it wasn't a mechanical failure, and he rushes down the road to the diner. He's fully expecting his wife to be waiting there, but when he bursts through the doors, he's met with just chilling silence. The owner and the patrons flatly tell him they haven't seen a woman or a truck all day. The panic instantly sets in as we're left with one terrifying question. Where did Laura actually go? Nick is absolutely desperate. He literally chases Red down on the highway, forcing him to pull over, only to be met with a flat, terrifying denial right to his face. Red says, "I never had any woman in my truck." Nick manages to flag down a passing police patrol, and they do a thorough search of Red's massive rig. But Laura is completely gone. Red just calmly insists Nick must have confused his truck with another one. And here is where the true nightmare sets in. With zero physical evidence, the police officer is powerless to act. Nick is just left standing there on the side of the highway, completely gaslit by the very man who took his wife. But then the true scale of the horror really hits you. Nick heads to the local police station and realizes this is not an isolated incident at all. He learns this town only has 2 police officers, and without hard proof of a kidnapping or a ransom demand, the feds won't intervene. Looking at a wall completely covered in faces of missing persons, Nick realizes the massive systemic failure at play here. If he waits for the legal system to save his wife, she's just going to become another forgotten photograph on that board. Section 3. The kidnapper's impossible demand. You know, desperation really does make us blind. Misguided by a fake tip from a guy at the diner named Al, Nick gets lured off the main road, ambushed, driven right off a cliff into a raging river, and ultimately captured by the very syndicate that took Laura. When he wakes up, he's face to face with the gang, and they demand a massive sum of money that Laura claimed they had in the bank, exactly $90,000. Now, Nick realizes they never had anywhere near that kind of cash. He quickly figures out that Laura cleverly pulled this highly specific number from a promotional price tag on some road trip snacks they joked about earlier in the car. It was this brilliant split-second lie to keep herself alive and buy them precious time. And now, Nick has absolutely no choice but to play along to validate her story. Section 4. The hunter becomes the hunted. The gang sends him to a local bank with a strict 1-hour deadline. Isolated and watched, Nick realizes he is entirely on his own. He only has a few $1,000s, he can't signal the bank tellers, and he obviously can't call for help. He has to improvise. And this moment brilliantly illustrates his radical psychological transformation. We see the shift from old Nick, the mild-mannered husband who earlier apologized to Earl just to avoid conflict, to new Nick, a ruthless survivor. When he meets Earl to hand over a fake stack of cash, Nick pulls a hidden pocket knife he stole from the bank, violently stabs Earl, takes his gun, and ties him up. His polite, everyday demeanor is completely gone, overridden by pure survival instinct. From here on out, Nick goes on a relentless offensive using brutal, improvised tactics. I mean, he physically tortures the truth out of Earl by violently breaking the car to extract Laura's location. He literally risks his life by clinging to the undercarriage of a moving truck all night just to trail the syndicate boss, Red. And then in this shocking reversal of roles, Nick actually infiltrates Red's own home, holding his oblivious family hostage at gunpoint just to get the keys to the warehouse basement where Laura's being held. Section 5. On the brink of death. So, Nick actually manages to free Laura. But they are trapped inside the warehouse grounds as the sun comes up and their nightmare transforms into an all-out deadly battleground as the rest of the heavily armed syndicate arrives. This kicks off a relentless chronological escalation. First, the container crash, then a massive highway chase, and finally, the bridge showdown. Escaping the warehouse triggers this high-speed pursuit onto the open road, where the kidnappers use the sheer size and weight of their massive vehicles as deadly, blunt force weapons to try and permanently erase Nick and Laura from the highway. But Nick strategically turns the environment against his pursuers, taking them out one by one. He forces Al's red car off the road, sending it into a fiery explosion. Then Billy crashes fatally into a detached trailer. But Red is still coming. Using the syndicate's ultimate weapon, that massive semi-truck, Red repeatedly slams Nick and Laura's failing car against a high bridge railing, terrifyingly crushing the vehicle, with Laura trapped right inside. It comes down to a desperate, final bid for survival. Nick actually leaps out and into the truck's cabin, fighting Red Tooth and Nail as the colossal vehicle literally teeters over the abyss. The truck's momentum carries it right over the edge, catching barely on the steel railing. Suspended high above the river, Nick pulls a tangled chain to throw Red off balance, sending the boss plummeting to the jagged rocks below. As Nick pulls Laura from the wreckage, they realize Red somehow actually survived the fall. Without missing a beat, Laura shifts the dangling truck into gear, dropping it to crush Red once and for all. It's an intense, wild ride that brings this explainer to a close, but it definitely leaves us with a lingering thought. How would you react if your perfectly ordinary life just vanished in a single second? How far would you go to save the person you love when the entire world turns against you? Thanks so much for joining me, and we'll see you on the next explainer.